She left me for a doctor, but I became the man she regretted losing. She said I wasn't enough for her. A year later, she was begging me for a second chance. We were married for 5 years. 5 years of doing everything I could to build a future. I worked long hours, picked up overtime when I could, and took on freelance gigs just to cover the rent, the car, the dreams we said we'd chase together. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't rich, but I was consistent. I was loyal. I believed in showing love through action. Not expensive dinners or surprise trips, but being there. Every single day. Apparently that wasn't enough. I still remember the way she said it. Calm. Almost rehearsed. Like she'd been practicing it in front of a mirror for days. "You're a good man," she said. "But I need more. Stability is nice, but it's not exciting. I need someone who pushes me, inspires me. Someone ambitious. Someone like him. A doctor she met during a charity event her company was involved in. Wealthy. Suave. Always dressed like he was heading to a magazine shoot. The kind of guy who could afford to fly her out for the weekend without checking his bank account. She didn't even try to deny it. She'd been talking to him behind my back for weeks. Maybe months. "I didn't mean to fall for him," she said, as if that excused the betrayal. "But he sees potential in me. He makes me feel alive." And with that, she packed her bags and walked out of the apartment we built together. No tears, no drama, just silence, and the echo of a door closing behind her. I won't lie, it broke me. The first few weeks were the hardest. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I kept replaying our last conversation in my head like some sick loop I couldn't shut off. All I could think was, what did I do wrong? What did he have that I didn't? But pain has a way of showing you who you are. And somewhere between the heartbreak and the sleepless nights, I realized something. Maybe I had been playing small. Maybe I had gotten so used to surviving that I forgot what it meant to thrive. That's when everything changed. I stopped waiting for closure and started chasing growth. I joined a gym, not just to pass the time but to transform. I showed up at 6 a.m. every day, sore, exhausted, but driven. I worked with a trainer, changed my diet, cut the junk, and committed to rebuilding myself, physically and mentally. Within 3 months, I didn't recognize the man in the mirror. And for the first time in years, I liked what I saw. But the transformation didn't stop there. I took a leap I'd been too scared to take while we were together. I launched my own business. I'd always talked about it, planned for it, but fear held me back. Fear of failing. Fear of not being enough. Funny how getting left behind frees you from the fear of losing someone. When you've already lost everything, there's nothing left to be afraid of. So I built it, brick by brick. Long nights, countless setbacks. Every dollar mattered. But I believed in what I was creating. And slowly things started working. The client list grew. The revenue climbed. I hired a small team, and people started to notice. Friends who once doubted me now called for advice. My own parents, who worried about me after the split, couldn't stop smiling when I showed them my progress. Even strangers on social media started following my journey. But none of that compared to what happened exactly 1 year after she walked out of my life. I was at a local cafe, taking a meeting with a potential investor, when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in over 12 months. "Is that you?" I turned, and there she was, standing just a few feet away, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She looked different. Not bad, just tired, worn down. That confident glow she used to have was gone, replaced by something quieter. Her posture said it all. "You look amazing," she said, almost breathless. I smiled politely. "Thanks. It's been a busy year." She hesitated, then laughed nervously. "I guess it has. I heard about your business. And wow, you've really built something." I nodded. "Yeah, it's just getting started." She looked like she wanted to say more, maybe apologize, maybe explain, but she didn't get the chance. My investor arrived, and I turned my attention back to the meeting. As I sat there discussing expansion plans and new locations, I could feel her watching me from across the room. And for the first time since she left, I felt nothing. No anger, no bitterness, just peace. The meeting went well. The investor was impressed, not just by the numbers, but by the passion I brought to the table. I'd spent the last year pouring every ounce of myself into this vision, and it was finally paying off. As I shook hands and watched him leave with a smile and a promise to follow up, I noticed she was still there, lingering by the exit like she was debating whether to stay or go. Part of me wanted to just walk out without a word, but curiosity won. I walked up to her, calm, composed. "Didn't expect to see you here," I said. "I didn't expect to see you like this," she replied, eyes scanning me like she was still trying to connect the man in front of her to the one she walked away from a year ago. There was an awkward pause. She looked down, then back up. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" Could have said no. Maybe I should have. But something in her tone told me this wasn't about rekindling anything. She needed something. Closure, maybe, or answers. So I nodded, and we stepped outside, away from the noise of the cafe. We sat on a bench by the sidewalk, cars passing, people walking, life moving on around us. She kept her hands in her lap, fingers nervously fidgeting. "I know I have no right to ask," she began, "but I just wanted to know how? How did you do it?" I looked at her, surprised. "Do what?" "Become this version of yourself. You're confident, strong. You have your own company. You're glowing, and it's not just physical. You changed. And I don't know what happened." I took a deep breath. "You happened." She blinked, caught off guard. "You said I wasn't enough. That you needed someone with more ambition, more drive. First, I thought you were right. That maybe I was the problem. But then I realized something. I had given you everything I had. My time, my loyalty, my effort. And you still wanted more, because you didn't know what real love looked like. You were chasing some fantasy of excitement. And when I couldn't be that, you left." Her eyes dropped. "So I stopped trying to be someone else's idea of enough. I stopped playing small to keep the peace. I got focused. I stopped living in the shadow of someone else's expectations." She nodded slowly. "I thought I was upgrading," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "He had the car, the house, the money, but none of it meant anything. He was cold, arrogant. He wanted a trophy, not a partner." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That was her truth to carry now. "I used to check your socials," she continued. "At first, just out of curiosity. Then, it became a habit. I watched your transformation, the gym videos, the business updates, the interviews, and every time I saw you smile, it hit me. That should have been me beside you. I made the worst mistake of my life. I let the silence stretch. I could see tears forming in her eyes, but I didn't feel the same ache I used to. That wound had closed. I came here today because I wanted to say I'm sorry," she said. "Truly, not for leaving, but for how I left. For making you feel like you were less than you are. You didn't deserve that." I nodded. "I know." She looked at me, hopeful. "Is there any part of you that's still?" I raised my hand gently, stopping her. "There's a part of me that will always care," I said honestly, "because we shared real moments. But the man you left behind isn't the man sitting here now. I didn't change for you. I changed because I had to, because I wanted to become the version of myself I could be proud of." I stood up, giving her a small smile. And I did. As I turned to walk away, I heard her whisper behind me, almost like a prayer lost in the wind. "I wish I had waited. I wish I had seen this version of you sooner." But it was too late. The door she slammed shut had long since been sealed. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need her regret. What I had was better peace, purpose, and the knowledge that I had become everything she said I couldn't be. I walked away without looking back. And this time it wasn't an act. I wasn't trying to seem strong or unaffected. I was strong. I was unaffected. Her words didn't sting like they once would have, because I had grown far beyond the version of myself that needed validation from someone who never really saw me. That old wound she left behind wasn't just healed. It was sealed, covered in scar tissue that reminded me daily of how far I'd come. But what happened next wasn't something I planned for. About a week after our unexpected run-in, I got an invitation. A major business expo was coming to town, a showcase of rising entrepreneurs and innovative startups. My company had caught the attention of one of the organizers, and they offered me a speaking slot. It wasn't just a panel. It was the keynote, the main stage. A year ago, I was working side jobs to pay the bills. Now, I was being asked to speak in front of hundreds of professionals, investors, and creators. I said yes. Not for the recognition, but because it felt like the right way to close the loop, to stand in front of a room full of people as the man I had become, not the man I had been left behind as. In the weeks leading up to the event, I doubled down, polished my presentation, worked with a coach, made sure every word I delivered reflected my journey, my grit, my growth. When the day came, I stepped onto that stage without nerves. No fear, just focus. I looked out at the crowd, took a breath, and told them the truth. Not just the success, but the failure, the heartbreak, the brutal moments of doubt that forged everything I had built. And when I finished, the room erupted. Standing ovation. Not because I said something brilliant, but because I lived something real. That night, my phone didn't stop buzzing. New clients, media requests, speaking invitations. Opportunities one had only dreamed of were now landing at my feet. And as all of that poured in, one message stood out among the flood. It was from her. Just 2 words. I saw. No explanation. No follow-up. Just confirmation that she had watched it happen, me rising, becoming, thriving without her. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I focused on what mattered. I kept pushing forward. I opened a second office across the city, brought on more staff, hired a full-time marketing team. The business wasn't just stable now, it was scaling. And with that success came something else. Something I hadn't even noticed creeping up on me until it was already there. Happiness. Genuine, grounded happiness. I reconnected with old friends. Started traveling, not to escape, but to explore. I tried new things, took risks, said yes more often. Life was no longer a series of survival tactics. It was full, rich, and mine. And somewhere in the middle of that new rhythm, I met someone. It wasn't a grand love story right away. There were no fireworks or over-the-top gestures. Just quiet conversations, shared laughter, and the kind of ease that comes when 2 people meet without pretense. She didn't ask about my past. Didn't prod about what had happened before her. She saw me as I was, not as a story or a project, but as a person worth knowing now. One evening, we were walking by the lake, and she turned to me and said, "You have this presence, like someone who's already walked through fire. It's not pain, it's clarity." I smiled. I've earned it. And I had. Every scar, every sleepless night, every doubt. It had all led me here, to a place where I could be proud of who I was becoming, not just because of what I'd built, but because of what I'd learned to let go of. But fate, as it always does, had one more card to play. A few months later, I got an invitation to a wedding. Not just any wedding, hers. A mutual friend still had us both on their list and didn't realize we weren't exactly on speaking terms. She was marrying someone new. Not the doctor. Not anyone I recognized. Just a name and a date. I looked at the invitation for a long time. I wasn't angry. I wasn't curious. I felt nothing. And in that nothingness, I found something powerful, freedom. I never RSVP'd. I didn't need to. I had already had my closure, my transformation, my rebirth. And on the day of her wedding, while she walked down the aisle toward another chapter, I was standing on a cliffside in another city, watching the sunrise with the woman who had become part of my present, not my past. That morning, she turned to me and said, "You're quiet today." I smiled. "I'm just thinking about how far I've come." She reached for my hand. "I don't know who hurt you before, but I'm glad they did, because it made you into this." And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. A few days after that sunrise, something strange happened. An old coworker of hers reached out to me through LinkedIn. Not a friend, not someone I had spoken to since the breakup, Just a name I barely recognized from the time she and I were still sharing an apartment and pretending we were building a future. The message was polite, but it caught my attention. "I'm sorry if this is crossing a line, but I thought you should know something. It's about her." I almost deleted it. I was past it. At least I thought I was. But curiosity doesn't fade easily, especially when it's tied to the deepest cuts. I opened the message, not expecting much. What I found was a short explanation and then a file. She hadn't just left me for the doctor. That was only the surface. The real reason she'd left, the one she never admitted during that cold goodbye, was that she had been setting up her next chapter for months before she ever said a word. The coworker explained that there were rumors, backed by actual proof, that she'd been leveraging my freelance work, things we worked on together late at night after my day job, and passing off parts of it as her own to gain clout with other people, including the doctor. She sold herself as the visionary behind ideas we brainstormed together in our tiny kitchen over cheap coffee and unpaid bills. My work had been her ticket out. I stared at the file attached to the message. Screenshots, documents, even an old email thread she had forwarded to a client using language I had written verbatim. And just like that, the story I thought I had put to rest twisted again. I wasn't just the man she left. I was the foundation she stood on while pretending she built it all herself. I didn't get angry. I didn't explode. Instead, I felt this quiet, eerie calm, like the final piece of a puzzle sliding into place, not to complete the picture of her, but to erase it. Whatever part of me still wondered why or what if was gone. I finally understood. I had been her stepping stone, and when she felt high enough above me, she jumped. But here's the thing about using someone to climb. You don't notice how far you've fallen until you look back and see they kept rising long after you let go. That night, I sat down with my journal and wrote 3 simple words. She's still behind. And she was. No matter how many new relationships she ran to, no matter what polished version of herself she presented to the world, I knew something she would never admit. She had it all, and she threw it away for something that sparkled for a moment but held no substance. The truth hit me hard in that moment. The people who can't love you at your lowest are never strong enough to stand beside you at your peak. And I was peaking. My company had doubled in size. We opened a 3rd office. I had clients in cities I'd never even visited. People I once idolized were now reaching out to me for guidance. Every step I took forward felt like justice, not in a vengeful way but in a full-circle kind of way. I wasn't just succeeding. I was becoming untouchable to the people who once doubted me. But success means little if you're carrying bitterness. I didn't want to be the man who measured his worth in someone else's regret. I wanted to move fully into the light I'd earned. That's why I didn't confront her, didn't send a message, didn't make a call. Instead, I focused on who I was becoming beside the woman who showed up when I wasn't performing. She met me in the middle of my healing, not at the top of my game. She didn't want my highlight reel. She wanted my truth, my setbacks, my scars, and she treated them with care, not judgment. We started traveling more, building our own version of home, city by city, memory by memory. I learned how to be present again, how to laugh without second-guessing, how to make space for joy without checking over my shoulder. The peace I had once fought for now surrounded me like armor. And still, every now and then, I'd see shadows from the past. A familiar username watching my stories. A mutual friend mentioning her name in passing. A tagged photo I didn't click on. But it didn't pull me back anymore. If anything, it reminded me how far forward I had come. People always say healing isn't linear. And they're right. There are days when the ghosts whisper, when the doubts creep in. But the difference now? I don't listen to them. I see them for what they are, echoes. Faint reminders of a version of myself that no longer exists. Because I'm no longer the man she left behind. I'm the man she never thought I could become. The one she didn't believe in. The one she underestimated. And now I'm living proof that someone else's doubt can become the fuel that drives your evolution. But the story doesn't end with success or transformation. It ends with a decision. One final moment that proved just how far I had come, and who I had truly become. Months passed. Life had taken on a rhythm I never imagined possible during those first painful days after she left. My mornings were filled with calm, not chaos. I woke up early not because I was anxious or haunted by memories, but because I had purpose. My business was thriving, my team respected me, and I was building something that reached far beyond profit margins. Something real, something lasting. And by my side was someone who never once questioned my worth, even when I did. But life, as it tends to do, wasn't done testing me. It happened on a rainy afternoon. I was speaking at a networking event, nothing big like the expo, just a small, intimate group of young entrepreneurs hungry for guidance. I shared my usual story, not the betrayal but the transformation. I talked about failure, grit, and the importance of rebuilding not for revenge, but for peace. When the session ended, I stuck around for handshakes and quick chats. And then, out of nowhere, I saw her. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, umbrella in hand, hair damp from the rain, eyes locked on mine like she was trying to figure out if I was real. And when she finally stepped forward, I could tell this wasn't just a coincidence. "I heard you were speaking today," she said softly. "I wasn't sure if I should come." I stayed quiet, calm, measured. "I needed to see it with my own eyes," she added. "Not just the social media version of you, not just the videos or the interviews. You, in person. I needed to see who you became." I nodded once. "Well, now you have." She bit her lip, looking down for a moment, then back up. "You probably don't want to hear this, but I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for what I said. That day when I left. I made it sound like you were holding me back. But the truth is I was scared. Scared you might actually succeed and leave me behind. And I couldn't handle that." Her voice broke. She wasn't performing this time. This wasn't a ploy or a show. It was raw, honest, a rare glimpse into the part of her I'd never been allowed to see. "I ruined everything," she whispered. "And I've spent every day since trying to convince myself I didn't. But I did. I left the one person who actually believed in me. I let her speak. I didn't interrupt. I didn't save her from the silence that followed. I don't expect anything," she said finally. I want you to know that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. And if there's ever a chance, even a small one, that we could start again, I'd do anything to earn it." The world seemed to go quiet. My past and present stood side by side, asking me to choose. But there was no decision to make. I looked at her. Not with bitterness, not with anger, but with the quiet power of someone who had already let go. "You're right," I said. "You did lose me. And maybe that's the best thing that ever happened to both of us." She blinked, stunned. "You don't even want to try?" I gave her a sad smile. "I don't live in the past anymore. I don't need closure. I don't need apologies. And I definitely don't need to reopen a chapter that already taught me its lesson." She reached out like she wanted to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "There's someone in my life now," I said. "Someone who didn't need to see the finished version of me to believe in who I could become. She didn't wait until I was successful to love me. She showed up when I was still rebuilding. That kind of love? I'm not trading it for anything." Her eyes filled, but she nodded. "Then goodbye." I smiled. Not out of cruelty, but because I finally meant it. "Goodbye." And I turned. I didn't look back. I walked out into the rain, feeling lighter than I ever had before. Not because she was gone, but because I was finally free. Not long after, I proposed to the woman who had walked into my life during the storm and never once tried to fix me, only to stand with me while I healed. She said yes without hesitation. And when I looked into her eyes, I saw the future I'd once been afraid to hope for, because I had become the man I always wanted to be. The man no one had to convince of his worth. The man who no longer chased closure, but lived in purpose. And if you've made it to the end of this story, I want you to remember something. Your worth is not tied to someone else's inability to see it. The people who walk away don't define you. The people who stay, who believe, who help you grow, they do. Don't wait for someone to regret losing you. Become someone they never deserved in the first place. If this story hit home for you, subscribe for more. Leave a comment and tell me how you turned your lowest moment into your greatest comeback. Because trust me, you're not just enough. You're more than they ever expected.